He checked into a $5 basement hotel to save time for an exam. By 1:05 a.m., he realized that the locked corridor had 3 people in it, and one of them wasn't human. Welcome to Alex's Story Time, and I am Alex. Today's story comes from Chen Fan. I will call him Chen in the story. He has been working in Beijing since graduating from university, engaged in human resources related work. This is his personal experience. At the end of 2015, the company he worked for provided him with a great training opportunity. According to the company's arrangement, he had to attend training courses every weekend. After half a year, he would take an exam. If he passed the exam, he would obtain an important certificate, which would be very useful for his future promotion, career prospects, and income. From the end of 2015 to May 2016, Chen studied hard on weekends. The exam was scheduled for May, a Sunday, to be held on campus of Renmin University. He lived in Shuangqiao, Chaoyang District, outside the 5th Ring Road in Beijing. The exam would start at 8:30 a.m. He was required to enter the venue by 8:20 a.m., meaning he had to arrive at Renmin University by 8:10 a.m. to avoid being late. Chen checked the distance on the navigation app, which was about 35 kilometers. On weekdays, Beijing's traffic is notoriously congested, and although weekends are slightly better, traffic jams still occur. He was worried about whether he could arrive at Renmin University so early. Later, he decided to stay near Renmin University on Saturday nights, find an inexpensive hotel, review his study materials in the evening, sleep until 7 a.m., have breakfast, and then head to the university. He did not want to rush to the exam due to traffic, which might affect his performance. So, on Saturday, Chen found a small hotel inside a residential community, very close to Renmin University, just a 5-minute walk away. He called the hotel via the phone number he found online, and they had rooms available at a very low price. He then packed his things for the exam and drove to the hotel. It was a Saturday afternoon, and despite the traffic, he managed to cover the 30-plus kilometers in nearly 2 hours, following the navigation to the hotel. In fact, this was not a regular hotel. It was just a landlady who had rented out a basement, done some simple cleaning, added a bed with bedding, a table, a chair, and a clothes rack. Yes, just a rack. It was the kind of cheap accommodation with very poor conditions. The landlady took him to the room. The basement entrance was locked with a large iron gate. Once inside, there was an L-shaped corridor with various pipes on the ceiling. There were 5 rooms, 4 for accommodation, and 1 as a shared bathroom. In the expensive capital, such a cheap place, $5 to $7 per day, it was acceptable. Chen did not mind this. He was only staying for 1 night and planned to leave early the next morning for the exam. The landlady introduced him to the other long-term resident, a man in his 30s, who was an English teacher at a training institution near Renmin University. The landlady said this man was very friendly and usually came back around 9 p.m. and went to sleep. There were no other guests that night. It would just be the 2 of them. Chen paid the fee and deposit. The landlady gave him a receipt with her phone number and handed him the keys to the room and the iron gate before leaving. Chen put his things away, locked the door, and went out for a walk. Had dinner, checked the exam venue at Renmin University, and then bought a bottle of water before returning to the hotel. Inside his room, to the right of the door was a bed, and to the left was a table with a plastic chair underneath and an iron clothes rack behind the door. He tried to go online, but the signal was poor and kept freezing. He thought it would be better to review his study materials since he had an exam the next day. He studied for about an hour until around 9 p.m. when he heard the iron gate open and someone entered. He put down his book opened the door and saw a man in his 30s, tall and dressed casually, carrying a backpack. He greeted the man. "Hello. I'm staying here tonight. I have an exam at Jim University tomorrow." The man replied politely. "Hello. I am an English teacher at the training center near the university. So, we're neighbors tonight." After a brief conversation, they both returned to their rooms. Chen continued to study until around 10 p.m., thinking it was time to sleep early to be well rested for the exam. He went to the bathroom at around 10:30 p.m., washed his face, and brushed his teeth. He did not take a shower because the wooden door was in poor condition and made a noise when closed. After a quick wash, he returned to his room, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The walls seemed to be made of the same boards, and he could hear sounds from outside. He heard the English teacher make a phone call in the hallway, but the signal was poor, so the call was brief. The teacher then went to the bathroom, and the sound of the door opening and closing was very clear. After returning to his room, the teacher's snoring soon began. Chen thought to himself, "Oh my God, what a good sleeper." He double-checked his alarm, set for 6:50 a.m. and 7 a.m., and decided to sleep. In the snoring of the English teacher, Chen fell asleep. He did not know how long he had been asleep when he was awakened by a sound. He opened his eyes and saw that the room was pitch black, but the sound was very clear. It seemed like someone was walking in the hallway, making a shuffling noise with slippers. He checked his phone and saw that it was 1:05 a.m. He tried to go back to sleep, but something fell off. The English teacher was snoring evenly, so who was walking outside? He realized that there were only two of them staying in the basement. Who could be walking around at this hour? He listened carefully to the footsteps, which seemed to move back and forth in the hallway, getting closer and farther away. The person walked past his door, moved away, and then came back again. Chen was puzzled. It couldn't be the landlady. Even if it were, she would have to open the iron gate, and she wouldn't just wander around in the middle of the night. Chen held his phone, checking the time constantly. It had been 10 minutes, and the footsteps were still there. But apart from the walking, there were no other unusual sounds. He tried to calm himself down, telling him not to be nervous or scared. The English teacher was there, and if there was a problem, he wouldn't have stayed long term. He decided to ignore it and go back to sleep as long as no one knocked on his door or bothered him. He pulled the blanket over himself, closed his eyes, and tried to sleep, but he couldn't. The footsteps continued, and he lay there, tense and silent, listening intently. After about 2 or 3 minutes, the footsteps stopped, but that made Chen even more frightened because the sound stopped right in front of his door. Chen was extremely nervous. He thought, "What does this mean? Is it a burglar preparing to rob me? Was he just observing the place before making a move?" As he was lost in these thoughts, he heard someone outside his door, whispering towards his room. His bed was right next to the door, and his head was very close to it. He was certain that someone was speaking through the door crack. His heart was pounding. The whispering continued, and he could hear the person giggling softly while speaking. The steady snoring of the English teacher next door was still audible. Until now, he could just hear footsteps, and he had been able to tell himself that it had nothing to do with him. But what about now? The person was right outside the door. It was hard for him to convince himself that it had nothing to do with him, even though he tried. The whispering outside the door was clearly directed at him. He could feel the distance between himself and the person was only a dozen centimeters or so, separated only by a thin wooden door. As this thought crossed his mind, he suddenly sat up in bed. The bed cracked loudly, and he felt a chill run through his scalp, his nerves on edge. The voices outside the door didn't stop. What he heard seemed as if the person had pressed their mouth close to the crack in a door and was whispering into the room. Chen's heart was pounding fiercely. He sat motionless on the bed, staring intently at the door. The voices outside continued, and his mind raced. What the hell was going on here? Was there any reasonable explanation? Was it the landlady? Was it the English teacher sleepwalking? Or was he trying to scare me on purpose? But the snoring from the next room kept going. No, wait. It had to be him. He was using the playback device to simulate the snoring sound. He was actually awake, standing outside my door, trying to frighten me. What is his motive? As for whether this idea is reasonable, no one really knows. But if it's not the English teacher, then who else could it be? His mind was in chaos and fear turned into anger. Chen shouted, "Who's there?" His voice echoed loudly in a confined basement, making his ears ring. The whispering outside stopped, and an eerie silence filled the space, except for the English teacher's snoring. After about half a minute, another sound emerged, even more terrifying. Muffled laughter could be heard outside his door. Chen was on the verge of a breakdown. He had always considered himself brave, but now he was experiencing unprecedented fear in this ordinary basement near the university. The laughter continued, and Chen was almost driven mad. He jumped out of bed, turned on the light, and looked around his room for something to use as a weapon. He spotted the plastic stool and grabbed it, smashing it against the door. The loud noise startled him, but the laughter outside ceased. For a brief moment, everything was quiet again, except for the English teacher's snoring. However, just a few seconds later, the sound of footsteps outside the door resumed, moving away from his room. Chen's heart eased slightly. At that moment, he thought to himself, no matter who you are outside the door, you can do whatever you want out there. Just don't enter my room. If you don't provoke me, I won't bother you either. The direction of the footsteps were heading deeper into the corridor, leading to the bathroom, which was diagonally opposite his room. Then Chen heard the sound of the bathroom door. He knew that the door hinge was old and would make noise whenever the door was moved. And now the door kept making sounds. Someone outside was repeatedly pushing and pulling the bathroom door. Chen could hear it clearly, and he was almost at his wits' end. Hiding was useless. Who was out there? What did they want? Damn it, he decided he would rather fight than cower in fear. He got up from the bed, barefoot, and yanked the door bolt off with one swift motion, letting it clatter to the ground. He then picked up a plastic stool from the floor and charged out. He saw the bathroom door, which was now slowly closing. The door didn't shut completely, leaving a gap of about 20 centimeters wide. Through this crack, he could see a figure inside the bathroom. There was no other exit in the bathroom except for this door, and since it was a basement, there was nowhere else for anyone to hide. At that moment, all Chen could think was, "Damn it, I'll fight you." He hurled the plastic stool towards the bathroom. The stool shattered, and the bathroom door was forced open. Just as Chen was about to rush into the bathroom, the light inside went out. The sudden darkness made him lose his courage. He screamed and jumped back, standing at the door of his room, shouting and cursing. He couldn't bring himself to enter the bathroom. With the light from his room, he could see that the bathroom appeared empty, at least in the area he could see. But it was certain someone had been there just a moment ago. Where did they go? He pounded furiously on the English teacher's door, shouting, "Open the door! Come out!" Eventually, his desperation turned to anger, and he began to curse as he continued to bang on the door. His palm grew numb from the force. Strangely, the English teacher remained asleep. Through the wooden door, the clear and steady sound of snoring could still be heard. Despite Chen's loud shouting and relentless pounding, the English teacher continued to sleep soundly. Damn it, even a pig would have been woken up by now. Then a thought popped into Chen's mind. Is this English teacher even human? He was startled by his own thought. He had originally believed that living in the basement with the English teacher meant he had a companion. But now he was doubting whether the English teacher was even a human being. Screw it, he had to get out of there. He rushed back to the room immediately, grabbed his phone and threw on his clothes. He didn't even put on his shoes, left his room door unlocked, and sprinted to the main iron gate in his tattered slippers provided by the cheap hotel. He was extremely nervous and couldn't even insert the key into the lock properly. He cursed and kicked at the door until he finally managed to unlock it. Without taking the time to close the door, he pushed it open and bolted out, running up the stairs to the ground floor, then out of the building and onto the street. He kept running and called the landlady, but her phone was off. He knew he couldn't go back. He had nothing valuable in the room. He checked the time. It was only 2 a.m. Where could he go? He couldn't go back to the car. It was just him in there. So he decided to go to an internet cafe. There were many 24-hour internet cafes near the university, and he needed to be around people. He found one, paid for a computer, and started surfing the internet. The cafe was full of young people playing online games in teams, but Chen couldn't focus. His mind was still filled with the strange events that had just happened. He stayed there, dazed and sleepless, until 6:30 when it started to get light outside. He felt a bit calmer and realized he needed to get his exam materials from the basement. His admission ticket was still there. When he rushed out to the basement, he didn't thought about his admission ticket at all. Now that he had calmed down, he realized he still had to take the exam. The whole reason he had come to stay here was to prepare for it. He called the landlady again, and this time she answered. He told her he wanted to check out and asked her to meet him downstairs. When he arrived, the landlady was already there. His first question was, "Did anyone else check in last night, besides me and the English teacher?" The landlady replied, "No. Why?" Chen recounted the entire experience without holding back. However, the landlady didn't seem surprised at all. She simply said, "Let's go and see what happened." She led the way, and Chen followed, keeping a 3-meter distance. He was ready to run at the slightest sign of trouble. They entered the basement, and everything was quiet except the English teacher's snoring. The landlady saw the broken plastic stool on the ground and Chen's open door. She knocked on the English teacher's door. After a while, he woke up, groggy and confused. He asked, what's going on? Chen asked him, didn't you hear any noise in the hallway last night? The English teacher said he hadn't heard anything. The landlady told the teacher it was nothing and asked him to go back to sleep. Then she turned to Chen and said, let's drop this matter. You can leave now. Let me refund the deposit. She didn't ask Chen to pay for the broken stool or the door latch. Chen packed his belongings and went to take the exam. Despite the scare and lack of sleep, he managed to pass the exam and obtain the certificate. After the exam, he went home, but he caught a cold, possibly from running out his sweat the previous night. He had a fever for 3 days and had IV therapy at the hospital. To this day, Chen still doesn't know what happened that night. Who or what was walking around in a locked basement hallway, whispering at his door, laughing eerily, and opening and closing the bathroom door. When he came out, he saw a shadow in the bathroom, but it disappeared. How could the English teacher sleep through all the noise the entire night? And why did the landlady's behavior seem so unusual? Did she know something? These questions remain unanswered to this day. So everybody, this is the end of the whole story. Please share what you think of the story and your stories. If you enjoy my work and would like to help me continue to bring these stories to you, please subscribe to my channel or like my page. Give a thumbs up to the stories you appreciate and share your thoughts, opinions in the comments. I love to read them. Share the stories with anyone who might find them enjoyable. And I need a co-editor, a native English speaker, to make these stories better. Thank you, everybody. This is Alex's Story Time, and I am Alex. I got a lot of good stories to share with you. So, see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.